During my undergraduate years, babysitting had been a regular employment for me, a quick way to get some extra cash while the parents went out on the town. I had no idea that one specific babysitting job would take me right into the center of a terrifying mystery that defied comprehension. On a Friday evening, I found myself in the Davis family's comfortable house. Mr. and Mrs. Davis were a young couple with a cute kid named Maya who was 5 years old. Like every suburban home, theirs was filled with the reassuring din of daily existence. I had previously provided childcare for them on a few occasions, and Mia was an absolute joy, a bright, creative youngster who had a soft spot for her collection of dolls. The night started off as usual, the routine of discussing Mia's preferred bedtime, her favorite snacks, and the do's and don'ts of the evening was explained by the parents. With happy waves, they left, leaving Mia and me in the cozy glow of the living room. When it was almost time for bed, Mia showed me her newest doll, an antique porcelain figure named Charlotte. Charlotte had a vintage appearance because to her elaborate outfit and soft features. Mia talked about Charlotte as though the doll had an independent identity, a silent playmate. Mia and I were left in a house that appeared to settle into a peaceful silence when the parents left. After reading books and playing games, Mia's bedtime finally arrived. She insisted on Charlotte being at her side as I tucked her in, saying the doll warded off the nighttime whispers. Mia had a very active imagination, and I laughed at her, thinking that the concept of nighttime whispers was just a childish fantasy. I had no idea that the evening would have many more disturbing things than a 5-year-old's light-hearted reflections. I took a seat in the living room and started working on some homework as Maya fell asleep, taking quick peeks at her through the baby monitor. The house echoed with a quiet silence that was almost unsettling, where there had previously been a child's laughter. As I was reading through my textbooks around midnight, I heard a faint, almost undetectable mumble coming from Maya's chamber. I wrote it off as my imagination, the result of a concentrated mind in a silent house. However, the whispering continued, becoming clearer and louder as the minutes went by. Odd energy seemed to be vibrating through Maya's chamber. I thought about looking into the source of the unpleasant sounds and hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I stepped gingerly toward Maya's chamber, the murmurs becoming more audible. I struggled to make out the words that were being transmitted across the air as the baby monitor on the nightstand crackled with static. There was a soft, eerie chant, a melody of voices that seemed like they were joining forces to create an unearthly symphony. Come and play, come and stay, in the shadows where we sway. I felt a chill run down my spine as the words lingered in the air. Mia's bed seemed to be the source of the whispers, coming from Charlotte, the porcelain doll. Its eyes, which had been lifeless, had taken on an unearthly brightness. This was a subtle change that went against the inanimate's reasoning. I was feeling uneasy as I looked at the doll, waiting for it to move or blink. But the whispering became louder, as though they were calling me to discover the mysteries of Maya's room. I reached for the doll, driven by a mix of curiosity and horror. The whispers intensified as my fingers brushed its smooth surface, the voices blending into a heavenly chorus that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of existence. Then the room was completely dark. The whispers intensified to a deafening chorus of ghostly voices that echoed through the room. I scrambled for the light switch, panic taking hold as the blackness clung to the corners of my vision. The lights flickered back on, and I was the only person in the room. After crackling with static, the baby monitor became silent. But Mia's bed was unmade. The covers were still in place, like though she hadn't been there. On with my pulse thumping in my chest, I looked around the room and felt a chill run down my spine. There was an eerie quiet that appeared to be mocking the truth of Mia's abduction. Once the whispering had stopped, I yelled her name, the sound resonating throughout the deserted house, but to no avail. I hurried through the home, looking in every room for any indication of Maya as fear bit me. It was strange and unsettling to be in such familiar surroundings again, as though the walls themselves concealed the mysteries of Mia's unexplained departure. I returned to Maya's room after a furious search and discovered Charlotte, the porcelain doll, on the floor. Its eyes had glowed with something strange, but now they were dead, staring back at us like a doll. The eerie chant and the murmurs appeared to be bits and pieces of an odd dream. I was racked with desperation as I thought about the unexplainable events that had transpired. The apparitional voices, The whispers, the abrupt darkness, all of it defied logic. Mia seemed to have disappeared into a world that only the living could comprehend, and with the intention of reporting Mia's disappearance to the police. I reached for my phone. But as I was dialing the emergency number, I became aware of a quiet music that seemed to be resonating throughout the house. Come and find, lost in time, where the shadows intertwine. The voice was unmistakably Maya's, resonant with ghostly energy. It was a ghostly echo that chilled me to the bone, and it seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. Mia's ethereal plea caused the now silent baby monitor to spark to life again. Motivated by a sense of urgency, I followed the eerie tune and Maya's voice echoing around the home. There seemed to be an unearthly energy in the air, and there was an unseen force pulsing through the walls. I had avoided going into the basement during the evening, but I followed the ghostly melody's route. With a groan, the door opened, revealing a pitch-black space that appeared to engulf even my phone's weak light. The eerie tune got louder as I made my way down the rickety stairs. The basement appeared to be a doorway to a world outside of reality, having previously served as a storage area for misplaced goods. Maya was standing in the middle of the basement, visible to me in the faint light from my phone. Her eyes sparkled with an ethereal brilliance, blank and remote. It was as like she had turned into a channel for something incomprehensible, for the whispers and ghostly sounds that seemed to come from her. Mia called out, "Come and play, and the shadows will stay," her voice having a spooky resonance that made me shudder. I was afraid when I got close to Maya since I didn't know what evil force had captured her. The shadows in the basement appeared to bend and twist, defying gravity with their eerie dance moves. I stretched out to touch Mia as the darkness rushed in, engulfing us in a suffocating silence. For a split second, reality itself appeared to break apart as the eerie music reached a discordant crescendo. I was in the basement by myself when the darkness finally broke. With Maya gone, the ghostly music reverberated into nothingness. The heavy hush descended upon me, leaving me to puzzle over the unexplained events that had occurred. I climbed the basement stairs, overcome with bewilderment and desperation. The house was burdened with a mystical mystery that eluded explanation, replacing the familiar hum of ordinary existence. With the doll Charlotte still on the floor where I'd seen it earlier, I staggered into the living room. Its eyes, which had been lifeless, had taken on an unearthly brightness. This change was subtle and reflected Mia's ghostly stare from the basement. I realized that the eerie music, the whispering, and Mia's disappearance were all related to the enigmatic doll. Charlotte seemed to possess a force that was beyond the realm of ordinary, a terrible power. Her fear and willpower colliding, I snatched the toy and ran outdoors. The area was shrouded in an unsettling quiet, and the night air was crisp. Standing on the front yard of the Davis household, I could hear Maya's ghostly tune resonating in the distance due to an eerie wind. I set Charlotte down on the ground and hesitated, a little nervous. The doll, which had once seemed like a harmless toy, was now burdened with a strange mystery. The doll appeared to be surrounded by dancing shadows as the eerie tune filled the air, taking on strange shapes that were beyond description. I watched in horror and wonder as the shadows came together to form a ghostly figure that uncannily resembled Maya. Reaching out toward the doll, the figure, a ghostly reflection of the real Maya, sent shivers through reality with its otherworldly touch. And for a brief moment, the lines separating the living from the dead seemed to dissolve as the eerie song reached a crescendo. The doll gave out a gentle glow that gave the night a spooky glow as it began to radiate an alien spirit. The person fused with the doll with a swift, ethereal force, and the eerie tune faded into quiet. After dancing in ghoulish patterns, the shadows vanished into the night, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. The weight of the paranormal experience settled over me as I stood on the lawn. Now a part of the doll, Mia's ghostly form seemed to represent a sense of closure and release. It seemed as though the enigmatic energy that had engulfed the house had released itself. Mia's voice crackled to life on the baby monitor, which had gone silent during the bizarre happenings. Through the air rang the ghostly song, now a gentle and consoling lullaby. It seemed as if Mia remained, not as a prisoner of the paranormal, but as a helpful energy that had found comfort in the enigmatic world beyond. The eerie silence that involved the Davis family's home gave way to a feeling of calm and harmony as soon as I stepped inside. As though honoring the end of a paranormal chapter, the lights flickered, Weeks passed, and the Davis family went back to their house without realizing what sort of paranormal activity had been going on while they were away. Once the focus of a spectral mystery, Mia was now carefree as she played with her dolls, seemingly untouched by the otherworldly forces that had impacted her life. I was afraid of the Davis family's reaction to the unexplained story, so I was hesitant to tell them all about that night. Rather, I departed from them with a feeling of normalcy, a return to the cozy suburban routine. I could still hear the eerie tune in my head as I left the Davis family's house. The doll Charlotte, the ghostly figure, and the eerie mystery all lingered, a haunting conundrum that defied logic. The placid suburban normalcy of the neighborhood resumed, as though the paranormal had never happened. And thus the speaking doll's mystery began to come to light, leaving a trail of suspicion in its wake. The mysteries of the mystical powers that had taken hold of Maya's room were hidden behind the walls of the home, a mysterious mystery that was beyond understanding. Moving forward, I couldn't help but wonder how many other homes had secrets hidden within, tales of mystery, and wonder whispered to those who would listen through their walls. Once a phantom chant, the eerie song had transformed into a lullaby of solace, a reminder that the line between the living from the otherworldly was frequently a thin one, easily breached by forces beyond our comprehension. As a simple way to earn some extra cash while exploring the world of bedtime stories and playful chuckles, babysitting had become a regular part of my college experience. But one night in particular became a terrifying journey that made me wonder where the lines are drawn between the otherworldly and the actual world. Emma and Jake Johnson, a family with 2 kids living in a calm suburban area, was the one who made the contact. The gregarious and extroverted parents required a nighttime sitter at the last minute. They told me the kids were already asleep, and all I had to do was watch the house till they came back. I accepted since it seemed like a simple job. The Johnsons lived in a contemporary house with many of windows that let in moonlight. I couldn't help but feel at ease in the peaceful neighborhood as I got comfortable in the living room. I had no idea that beneath the peaceful exterior of suburban life, the night was bearing such darker secrets. During the first few hours, I watched TV and completed my college homework. The hours ticked by without incident till midnight. At that point, the situation took an unexpected turn. Even with the warm blanket around me, I shivered when a sharp chill gripped the room. I wrote it off as a draft, blaming the spooky vibe on the late hour. But as the minutes passed, the temperature seemed to drop, and the home filled with an uncomfortable silence. A mixture of curiosity and apprehension crossed my mind as I looked down the corridor that went to the kids' quarters. That's when I realized Emma's bedroom had a faint glimmer coming from it. Beneath the door, a gentle, dreamy light swirled, creating shadows that appeared to have a life of their own. My inner babysitter came out, and I cautiously made my way to Emma's room. The radiance grew stronger, and when I opened the door, I saw an odd sight. Emma's room, which was normally filled with colorful posters and plush toys, had an ethereal glow to it. Emma and Jake were sitting cross-legged on the floor in the middle of the room, with a beautiful arrangement of candles surrounding them. The flickering flames' brightness created an enthralling pattern of shadows on the walls. Their huge, unblinking eyes appeared to be focused on something invisible. "Hey guys, what's going on?" I questioned, sounding unsure. Emma and Jake motioned for me to join them without waking up. I sat down among the candles, intrigued and a little uneasy. An unearthly energy seemed to be charging the air, and a feeling of dread descended upon me. I saw a small, worn box in the middle of the candle. Light patterned as my eyes grew used to the strange sight. Emma and Jake exchanged a sly look, their faces displaying a mixture of nervousness and eagerness. Emma said, her voice just audible over the crackling of the candles, "We found this game online. We refer to it as the Midnight Game. It is said to open a portal to a different dimension." I sneered, putting the weird atmosphere down to children's fanciful imaginations. "Guys, this is only a game. Come on. Portals cannot be opened by candles or shadows." I looked around the room, but something didn't feel quite right. The shadows twisted and twisted in strange ways, as if they moved apart from the candlelight. I could hardly hear a murmur in the room, a ghostly chant that made my spine tingle. It is midnight when the shadows blend together, open the door to unknown realms. The temperature decreased even further as the chant reverberated throughout the space, and the candlelight took on an ethereal quality. The shadows that had been weak before now swirled with a sinister force, their forms taking on patterns that were incomprehensible. A feeling of worry descended upon me, and I looked at Emma and Jake, whose eyes were glowing with a sinister brightness. Whether they realized it or not, the kids had unintentionally created a portal to a world outside of our comprehension. I realized with the start that the midnight game was more than just kids' entertainment. The shadows that had previously only reached to the walls now seemed to be reaching toward us with ghostly fingers, and the room seemed to be pulsating with an unearthly intensity. As I saw the shadows combine to create a dark figure in the middle of the candlelit pattern, fear tore at my chest. The figure moved with an uncanny grace, a silhouette that appeared to defy the constraints of reality. It appeared as though an unexplainable presence had emerged from the very fabric of the night. A voice resounded in the space, far away and eerie. "You've got the door open. The shadows will now investigate." When the figure moved in our direction, moving in time with the ghostly dance of the shadows. I was overcome with panic when I realized that the midnight game had released something much more than just a light-hearted distraction for kids. I grabbed for the little box in the middle of the candlelit pattern, desperate to close the sinister portal. A gentle wind blew through the chamber, putting out the candles as it went, and the worn container seemed to exude an otherworldly energy. The radiance subsided, and the once-moving shadows returned to their usual, still form. There was an uncomfortable silence as the figure in the center vanished. Emma and Jake blinked, as though emerging from a dream, their eyes going back to their typical naivete. The once otherworldly light that filled the room had faded to the appearance of a typical child's bedroom. "What just happened?" Emma questioned, her voice faltering, uncertain how to account for the unexplainable happenings. "You guys have discovered something that we cannot comprehend. The midnight game is a gateway to something unearthly, not a game." I had a sudden epiphany as I was speaking. The ghostly figure, the shadows, and the chant were not limited to the kids' chamber. The entire house was infused with the otherworldly force, permanently altering the very fabric of reality. I scanned the now eerily quiet home, and a feeling of dread fell over me. The formerly familiar areas appeared to be enveloped in an eerie quiet, as though the midnight game had left its mark on every nook and cranny of the house. I hurriedly led Emma and Jake out of the room and into the living room, where they were secure. All the same, there was still an unearthly force in the air, and there was a faint murmur. In a way is midnight when the shadows blend together. The door has been opened, leading to unknown realms. The words shivered down my spine, an eerie echo of the song of the specter. The evil energy released by the unfortunate game appeared to resonate through the walls itself. I was desperate, wondering how I could reverse the unintentional invocation. A look around the kids' room turned up a frayed piece of paper that turned out to be the midnight game's instructions. On the steps that had been written off as a child's imagination were now essential to shutting the open door. I did as I was told, muttering the incantation, reenacting the candlelit pattern, and waiting for the menacing entity to materialize with nervous hands. A mystical power caused the air to thicken, and an unearthly energy seemed to move the once dormant shadows. I felt a wave of dread come over me as the figure appeared in the center of the room. The entire fabric of reality appeared to twist and warp as the spectral chant reached a discordant crescendo. And with a determined move, I shut the little box, trapping the evil energy inside its worn walls. The stifling silence lifted as the glow subsided and the shadows moved away. I was shaken and exhausted when I awoke to see Emma and Jake in the living room, their eyes wide with curiosity mixed with terror. Now that the midnight game's fragments were safely inside the little box, the mystical force that had taken hold of the house appeared to be confined. I told the kids how serious the matter was, but with heavy heart. Once written off as a harmless amusement, the midnight game had opened a portal to a world beyond comprehension. For now, though, the spectral energy appeared to be confined. The Johnsons returned later that night, unaware of the paranormal activities that had taken place while they were gone. I was hesitant to tell them the disturbing truth because I didn't want to expose them to the scary reality that was hiding in their own house. Ultimately, fear won out, and I said goodbye to the Johnsons without bringing up the midnight game or its unearthly repercussions. The weight of that unstated reality hung in the air as I left their home. The otherworldly energies that had taken hold of Emma's room continued to elude her, their mysteries concealed deep behind the house's walls. A mysterious mystery that was beyond comprehension. Once an innocent amusement, the midnight game had turned into a terrifying reminder that there was frequently very little curtain separating the extraordinary from the mundane. And thus the secret of the midnight game began to come to light, leaving a shadow of suspicion in its wake. The ghostly energies that had danced in the shadows cast by the candles were still elusive, their mysteries hidden in the peaceful suburbia. Moving forward, I couldn't help but wonder how many other homes had secrets hidden within, tales of mystery and wonder whispered to those who would listen through their walls. Once a spectral chant, the midnight game had become a terrifying memory of a night when reality dissolved and shadows came to life in a demonic dance. Babysitting was never my first choice for additional money, but college expenditures had a way of forcing you to take on odd tasks. I had no idea that one seemingly ordinary babysitting job would send me into a terrifying night that would alter my perspective on childhood innocence. The Andersons, a young couple from the neighborhood, wanted someone to look after their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, on this cool autumn evening. Their contemporary house was furnished with slick furnishings and elegant accents that gave the impression of wealth. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson gave me an update on Lily's bedtime ritual as I snuggled into the plush sofa, pointing out how much she enjoyed her nursery rhymes before falling asleep. The parents left, leaving Lily and me alone in the comfortable living room while she lost herself in a vibrant picture book. The clock was ticking away, and I couldn't help but notice how peaceful the house felt as the evening shadows began to fall. As Lily's bedtime drew near, I carefully followed the Andersons' instructions. A last reading, a bath, and pajamas before snuggling her into bed. Lily's fondness of nursery rhymes was noted by the parents, and I discovered a well-worn collection of beloved rhymes when perusing the bookshelves. Lily's eyes glistened with pleasure as I started to recite the well-known words. Her tiny voice blended with mine, resonating throughout the peaceful home. The room filled with the innocent innocence of youth, making it a pleasant moment. I had no idea that Lily's nursery would soon become rid of its innocence and be filled with a lurking evil. I bid Lily farewell for tonight, turned out the lights, and shut the door to her bedroom. The only sound emanating from the house was the murmur of passing cars in the distance. I went back to the living room with the intention of reading some more till the Andersons came back. A spooky feeling crept up my spine as I lost myself in the novel's pages. It began as a faint feeling that something was wrong, a subtle uneasiness. I dismissed the unease, explaining it away as the new environment and the duty of watching the children. But then I heard a faint music, and my anxiety increased. I wrote it off at first as a figment of my imagination. However, as the eerie tones continued, I discovered they were coming from Lily's chamber. Finding once charming and innocent nursery rhymes developed an unsettling aura that made my skin crawl. I was nervous and curious at the same time as I got closer to Lily's door. The nursery rhymes had an unpleasant tone to them, as though some unseen force had deformed the well-known melodies. Turning the doorknob, I hesitantly peeked into the poorly illuminated room. Lily was sleeping soundly in her bed, her eyes closed, much to my astonishment. The source of the music was particularly unsettling. There, in the room's corner, shadows appeared to be dancing to warped nursery rhymes, dark shapes twisted and distorted, assuming strange shapes that went against the well-lit room's logic. I massaged my eyes, certain it was a figment of my hyperactive imagination in the low light. However, the shadows continued to dance in time with the weird music when I opened them again. A feeling of dread descended upon me as the room's atmosphere grew heavier. With the intention of waking Lily and putting an end to the strange show, I hurried to her bedside. The nursery rhymes reached a discordant crescendo as I caressed her shoulder. Lily opened her eyes, and to my dismay, her once pure look appeared empty, as though she were a container for an incomprehensible force. A whisper went through the room that was not Lily's, an eerie chant that made my spine tingle. The shadows speak with a tick-tock. Shut your eyes and don't make any noise. I drew back, my brain straining to make sense of the bizarre image I was seeing. The area was filled with ominous nursery rhymes, and the shadows appeared to be pulsating with an unearthly force. I staggered back, panicking, eyes riveted to the unsettling screen. No longer restricted to the corner, The shadows started to slither over the walls, creating bizarre patterns that went beyond the rules of physics. The nursery rhymes seemed to have created a portal to a world where reality was distorted and twisted like a terrifying nightmare. I groped for Lily's bedside lamp, a flash of light that appeared to ward off the approaching shadows, driven as much by curiosity as by dread. The creepy music subsided and the space took on a rather normal quality. Lily blinked, her innocent expression returning, as if she had just woken up from a dream. I felt a wave of relief sweep over me as I gripped the lamp, the shadows moving back into the room's corners. The nursery rhymes, a thing of the past now, lingered in the air like a ghostly lullaby. I asked Lily about the shadows and the eerie chant, determined to make sense of the unexplainable events. She insisted that she didn't remember anything out of the ordinary, though. As she looked at me with childlike innocence, it appeared that the shadows were limited to the warped space between reality and a bad dream. The Andersons' vehicle pulled into the driveway as I continued to think about the strange event. The parents thanked me for the evening and paid me for my services, not realizing the strange things that had happened while they were away. I was hesitant to tell them the disturbing truth, because I didn't want to expose them to the scary reality that was hiding in their own house. Ultimately, fear won out, and I said goodbye to the Andersons without bringing up the eerie nursery rhyme extravaganza. The weight of that unstated reality hung in the air as I left their home. The eerie enigma that demanded an answer tormented my thoughts, along with the nursery rhymes, the shadows, and Lily's vacant stare. Weeks passed, and I still couldn't get that night out of my head. I could no longer shake the warped melodies of the nursery songs, which seemed to be taunting me. I started my investigation, searching the internet for any indication of paranormal activities connected to nursery rhymes, determined to solve the enigma. I was shocked to learn of a local legend about an elderly nursery rhyme collector who had previously resided in the neighborhood, Eleanor Blackwood. The tale said that Eleanor had a preoccupation with maintaining the integrity of traditional nursery rhymes and had gone to considerable measures to gather uncommon and antiquated renditions of the well-known songs. There were rumors that Eleanor had dabbled in witchcraft and thought that nursery rhymes' real power came from their ability to communicate with the paranormal. Some said she had called forth shadows, that the strange chanting had opened a portal to a world where nightmare and reality blended together. I became horrified to learn more about Eleanor Blackwood as I read further. Eleanor had once owned the Andersons' home, and the book of nursery rhymes I had found was probably in her collection. The discordant music in the shadows seemed to allude to a dark legacy that the eccentric collector had left behind. Armed with my newfound knowledge, I returned to the Andersons' home determined to solve the riddle. Nursery rhymes that had earlier been wholesome and consoling now held a sinister undertone. I was a little nervous when I walked inside Lily's room. As I got closer to the book of nursery rhymes, the shadows that had lain in the corner started to stir. I carefully opened it and found pages full of remarks and handwritten notes by Eleanor Blackwood. Once innocent, the nursery rhymes were now a vehicle for something much darker, a byproduct of Eleanor's paranormal research. I realized something as I combed over the notes. The eerie chanting and shadows were lingering repercussions of Eleanor's search for magical abilities. The nursery songs had transformed into a perverse spell that conjured up a world in which shadows performed to a menacing tune. The squeak of Lily's bedroom door interrupted my epiphany. The shadows had come out of the corners and were coming at me, their hideous shapes twisted with a force that seemed otherworldly. The eerie chant reverberated throughout the space, the dark nursery rhyme permeating the very air. I felt a wave of fear come over me as I faced the approaching darkness. The book of baby rhymes toppled from my grasp. Its pages fluttered in the phantom wind. The chamber had the impression of being twisted and warped, as if Eleanor Blackwood's sinister legacy caused reality to bend. I grabbed Lily's bedside lamp with a renewed sense of resolve, its light serving as a beacon against the approaching night. The flash of light made the shadows flee, breaking their dance. The eerie chant subsided, and the space seemed to be back to normal. Just as the darkness began to fade, I saw a figure appear in front of me. It was an ethereal apparition with eyes that looked straight into my soul. It was Eleanor Blackwood, a ghost constrained by the ruins of her sorceress endeavors. She spoke in a whisper that reverberated throughout the space, expressing remorse and longing as a soul caught between the two worlds she had attempted to control. I realized in that brief instant the tragedy of Eleanor's ambition for power. Once innocent, the nursery rhymes had now become a channel for energies outside her control, supernatural forces. The eerie chanting and shadows were the remains of a woman who had been engulfed by the very darkness she had tried to control. Eleanor Blackwood withdrew her melancholy stare and vanished into the shadows, leaving a deafening quiet in her wake. The children's book of nursery rhymes, lying on the ground, was evidence of the evil legacy that persisted in the Andersons' house. I couldn't shake the idea that certain mysteries were destined to remain unexplained as I exited Lily's chamber, the air heavy with the weight of the strange encounter. Nursery songs, which had once brought solace to young children, now serve as a menacing reminder that there is frequently a thin line separating the supernatural from the everyday. The Andersons went back home without realizing what had happened in their absence. I considered telling them the truth, the disturbing history that remained attached to their home, but terror stopped me in my tracks as I stood in front of them. I could not help but think of the nursery rhymes as I left the Andersons' house. There were lingering shadows, an eerie chant, and the ghostly form of Eleanor Blackwood, a ghostly mystery that defied logic, once a sanctuary of purity. The Andersons' home had turned into a center of the paranormal, with its walls evoking legends of a sinister past that existed outside of space and time. And so, with a lingering feeling of discomfort, the mystery of the nursery rhyme shadows began to unravel. The mysteries of the mystical powers that had taken hold of Lily's room were hidden behind the walls of the home, a mysterious mystery that was beyond understanding. As I continued on, I couldn't help but wonder how many other houses had secrets hidden within, tales of sorrow and hopelessness slipping through the walls to those who would listen. Once a source of delight for kids, the nursery rhymes had evolved into an eerie warning that some secrets were best left unsolved.